The Branching Out podcast is pleased to be sponsored by Vivid Pics.
So you're getting together with your family for the holidays, and it seems like the perfect time to get them to share their family history stories. But how are you going to get them to open up?
Without spiking the eggnog.
Well, we've got some ideas for that, so stay tuned.
This is the Branching Out Genealogy podcast, your go-to guide for family history news, tips, tech, and tea. Here are your hosts, Elizabeth Swanee O'Neill and Tami Osmer-Mize.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Branching Out Genealogy podcast. I'm Elizabeth Swanee O'Neill, a board-certified genealogist and author of the website Heart of the Family, and I'm here with my co-host, Tami Osmer-Mize.
Just plain certifiable.
Who is the manager of the Conference Keeper website. How are you doing today, Tami?
Doing really good. I'm enjoying the lovely winter weather here in North Carolina. Anything that doesn't include mosquitoes is beautiful weather to me, and that's what I like about it being cold here.
Well, no snow here in California, but it has been cold in the mornings.
Before we move on, I want to thank all of you who listened to our very first episode. According to our poll on Spotify, almost 3/4 of you plan to attend RootsTech, either virtually or in person next year, which is great. I'm so excited that we get to be there in person, so looking forward to meeting people too that also end up showing there. We've got a jam-packed episode for you today, so let's get on with it.
And today we're talking about collecting family stories. One thing I've noticed over my 3+ decades of research is that sometimes we come across a family story that is so amazing that we can't understand why no one else in the family knows about it. Somehow that story got lost across the generations. Now, Tami, I know you've got a story like that. Can you tell us about it?
I do. I have several, but the one that was the real biggie for me was shortly after I started researching. I had mentioned last week that I started researching when my father was interested in his family history. So I started by researching into his line. And at first, I'll admit, I was a name collector. I wanted just names and dates and names and dates.
I think we all started that way.
You know, isn't it the truth? Well, I got back to my 5th great grandmother on my dad's side, and I came across a book that had all of these wonderful stories about the family, and it was enlightening to me. I hadn't come across all of these stories before, and the one that caught me and hooked me for life on finding stories was the story of my 5th great grandmother, Rachel Negus. She lived in Connecticut, and she and her family decided that they were going to move out west, which at that time was the Western Reserve. So they packed up their wagon and got ready to move. But before she moved, she went to the cider mill and she filled her pockets with apple seeds. Of course, you know, Johnny Appleseed type thing. But she did this and walked all the way to the Western Reserve with their family and the wagon and all of their belongings. And they settled there in the wilds of what would soon be Ohio, but hadn't become that yet. And while she was living there, she started planting her apple seeds. And she had an apple orchard, and she would cultivate the different seeds that had grown and the different plants that she'd gotten until she came up with an apple that she really liked, and she named it after her husband, Jonathan. My connection to history when I read that was immediate and everlasting, and from then on, all I wanted to do was find out the stories of my ancestors.
That's a very cool story. Do you have any of those seeds?
Only when I go to the grocery store and buy me a Jonathan apple. So that's my lost family story that no one in my family had ever heard of until I read about it. Do you have a lost family story, Elizabeth?
Well, I have a few lost stories, actually, but I think the one that made the biggest impression on me isn't a happy story like yours was. It's the story of my ancestor, Louise Redouty Favor, and her husband, Andrew Favor. And they got married in Ohio in 1878, and they moved to Iowa. They had about 10 children, but only 5 survived that I know of. Anyway, so Andrew was basically a drunk. In fact, he frequently got so drunk that he would be unable to work for a week at a time by his own admission. And eventually Louise just had enough. And she made the rounds to Andrew's favorite saloons and warned them not to serve her husband anymore. And because of a law that was enacted in that area, the saloon keepers were required to comply with the wife's wishes. Well, they didn't. And long story short, Andrew got drunk with his buddies one night after work, and he got on the train to go home. It was a cold and snowy night. I think it was one of the coldest nights that they'd had. And being drunk, he got off the train at the wrong stop. And I guess he got disoriented and he fell asleep in the snow and he almost died.
Wow.
And as a result, his fingers were so badly frostbitten that they had to be amputated. And it made it impossible for him to continue working as a tailor, which was his job. But he did get to keep his thumbs, though, so I guess there was something good there. But anyway, so Louise sued the shopkeepers. I think it was the first suit of its kind that was put forth. And eventually it made its way all the way up to the Iowa State Supreme Court. And she eventually won her case, and she got a whopping $7,123 in compensation. And this story made the newspapers across the country, but you will never guess where I originally found this story.
Where did you find it?
I was just randomly Googling, and I found it in the textbook called Manhood Lost, Fallen Drunkards, and Redeeming Women in the 19th Century United States by Elaine Franz Parsons. So I found my ancestor story in a book about drunks and the women who loved them. And there's a picture of him, the first picture I'd ever seen of this branch of the family. And it was taken for the trial, and he's holding up his hands with no fingers on them. So I'm like, oh, okay, nice to meet you there, great-great-great-grandpa. So you just never know where you're going to find a family story.
Well, you got to love Google Books, too. And if they don't have the whole thing there, they tell you where you can find it. I've come across some great stories on Google Books, too, but nothing in a book about fallen drunkards, fortunately.
Wasn't I surprised?
But this just shows that in all of our ancestors' lives, there are good stories and there are not so good stories. And there's really some bad stories, too. But it's really important that we look for them all and we remember them all, because those are the stories of someone's life.
That's right. And I think we tend to shy away from those unhappy stories, and we want to picture our ancestors as these shiny, happy people, but they were just regular old people, and some of them had great lives and some of them had not so great lives, like Andrew.
Yeah. No, I think his wife had it rougher than he did.
100%. She had it rougher. She had to work as a washerwoman, taking in other people's clothes and washing them in her home to make up for the money that he wasn't earning. So, yeah.
That's a shame.
Wasn't pleasant being her.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, so let's turn now to some different ways to collect those family stories. The holidays are here now, like it or not, and it's a time when families gather together. And it's that perfect time to try to capture those family stories. Now, Tami, I know you've got some ideas for different ways to collect family stories. So what have you got for us?
Well, the first thing I want to mention is that while we may think that we have all of the family stories, it's kind of funny when you talk to siblings or cousins or other very close relatives that experienced the same things you did, that their take on the story of what happened is completely different. So even though you know the stories, listen to their versions of them. The important thing is getting those stories rolling when you're in a family gathering. You have to get the conversations going, and you always need to find a way to steer them towards family history. I've always joked that I can take any conversation and get it going towards genealogy within maybe 2 to 3 minutes. And I can actually do that.
That's a slow day when it takes you a whole 3 minutes.
That's true. That's when I'm being polite, I think. But one of the neat things that's come out recently is the MyHeritage Live Memory. And I was thinking about how this would be a great way to get stories flowing in a family gathering, to pull out your phone that you've created one of these live memories on and show it around to people, because everybody knows that photos elicit memories and, if nothing else, comments, that's for sure. So the MyHeritage Live Memory is a premium feature on MyHeritage, and it uses artificial intelligence to create a short animated video from a still image, from a basic photograph. I created one when this came out to try it out. And I watch the thing daily. A picture of my dad in the 1930s as a young boy boxing with a neighbor. And I'd seen this photo a million times of he and this other little boy with their dukes up. The MyHeritage Live Memory program took that and turned it into a whole fisticuffs event. And you could even see dust flying under their feet. It's really well done AI, at least the experiences that I have had. And anyone can try MyHeritage's Live Memory for free. But if you want to create more than just a few that are free, then you'll need to have a subscription to the MyHeritage website. But that, to me, I was thinking would be a great way to get people's minds on family stories. Oh, do you remember this event? Do you remember that event?
And even if people looked at it and they thought, well, that's not really what it looked like, it would still get them talking, and they could tell you what actually happened and continue that story. People are going to talk when they see those animated pictures. Something's going to come out of them, either good or bad.
They do. And even if it's not a comment on the photo that you're showing, everybody, if you've ever noticed in a conversation, there tends to be oh, that's nice, but here's my story, or here's my take on it. People kind of want to one up, and they don't mean to, but everybody's got stories to tell and are looking for the opportunity to share them. So it's really important that when you're in the situation where you've got family members and you want to hear these stories, to ask questions, kind of prompt them with photos or not, but listen. That's the most important part, is keep your mouth closed.
That's right.
Even if you already have heard the story a million times, listen to it again. On one hand, there might be something else that gets included this time that you never heard before, or somebody else in the room might chime in with their take on it, or even go off in another direction on another story. So keep quiet and listen, and encourage other people to put in their 2 cents and to talk.
And one thing I've noticed is, especially with my dad, is that when people get older, they're starting to, I guess, feel their mortality a bit. I've noticed that my dad is starting to talk more and be more open, whereas he used to not really talk about his life. But I think that as people get older, they're feeling like, if I don't tell my stories now, they're going to be lost. And when I'm gone, all of these things that happened to me are going to be gone, and no one's going to remember me the way that I want to be remembered. So be attentive when they start opening up and talking. Be ready to listen.
And don't be judgmental. That's another thing. As people get older and they want to share stories that maybe they didn't before because it was a sensitive subject, or because they were embarrassed by it, 40 years away from an event, you maybe aren't embarrassed anymore. So, but be sensitive to how other people are presenting and sharing their story. I talked a little bit about providing prompts like photographs, which is always an easy way. It's an easy icebreaker. But you also want to be able to ask kind of the right questions. And this goes for whether you're in a gathering or whether you're sitting down one-on-one with someone to try and collect their stories, or even for yourself if you want to work on writing out your own history. But, where do I start? You don't want to start with, okay, I was born in a hospital. Because those aren't the stories that you really that you're looking for. Everybody can, that's on your birth certificate. The Oral History Association is huge, and their website has wonderful tips and resources and guidelines for doing interviewing of all kind, whether it's remote, whether, again, like you're sitting with someone, whether it's for you, and even great ideas for getting conversations started. So that's a great place to go and look through, see what they have in terms of prompts. And their blog is at oralhistoryreview.org, and there's just a wealth of information available there.
So once you get your family talking and they're opening up and they're sharing around the table, what do you use to collect those stories?
Well, you can always just open up the voice recorder on your phone, but that's not always the best way to do things. It's certainly an option. So I'm gonna start by going over a few ways that you can collect those stories and make them more permanent in your own personal archives and with your photos and all. So I'm going to start with a company that a lot of us are familiar with. Most genealogists had been introduced to Vivid Pics with their photo restoration software called Restore, which would take an old photo and help adjust the colors and take out that old yellowy film over them. But Vivid Pics has really branched out themselves, and they're constantly improving and innovating and developing new products, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about in other episodes because they just do so many great things. But I'm going to focus this time on their story collecting memory station software, which can be used all by itself, either with your own scanner or with photos that you've already digitized. It's super easy to use. I was just using it the other day, in fact. And what sets it apart from other memory recording sites and software is that you can do everything with your photo right from within the Memory Station program. You bring in a photo that you've already digitized or have just digitized, or you already have it on your computer. You can color correct and image correct with the Restore program. It's right there. And then you click the record button, literally just click a button and add your memories in your own voice. And once you do that, the third step is you can add more photos and more stories around that same event and easily turn it into this little video that tells a whole story, not just a photo in a story, but photo with the stories going through. And in your voice, it turns it into a little movie there. It's really cool. And you can try it out for free. You can create 5 stories for free. And if you love it, you can purchase a software. One of the things I really like about the way Vivid Pics does things is that their programs are a one-time purchase and not a subscription. So it's not something that you're tied into. When you make your stories, you download them to your own computer. They're not stored somewhere else that you have to pay to constantly have access to. It's a great way to collect stories, record them, keep them with photographs that you already have.
Rick came to my genealogy society when he was on his road trip earlier this year, and he demonstrated this at our society library, and people were loving it. They really enjoyed using it. So this is really something that you want to look into and think about all those great conversations and stories you can get from those pictures.
No kidding. Pictures, they say a picture tells 1,000 words. I think that's what it is. But they really do. And again, like I mentioned earlier, everybody sees something different in the same photo. Everybody has a different memory of it. So that's one really great and super easy way to record those stories. You could set up your laptop right out in the family room and have everybody looking at the same photo and recording. You could have everybody talking at the same time, recording memories of the same photograph even. On a much bigger scale, though, the most well-known group out there that collects stories of regular everyday folks is StoryCorps. And every year they do pushes around Thanksgiving for people to go out and collect stories. That's all they're about, is having everyday people collect and record the stories of their lives. Now, they have a booth year-round available at the Atlanta History Center in Georgia, but they have a mobile tour that goes all over the country. And you can go to their website and see where their mobile recording booth is going to be. And if it's anywhere near you, you can just set up a little appointment, go in, record your story in a professional sound booth. And sometimes they even have people there to help you and explain and give you ideas on what direction to go. All of the stories that are recorded, if you give your permission, the recordings are then archived at the Library of Congress, and StoryCorps shares them, some of them on their podcasts and on their own online archive. But again, that's with permission. They say that their online archive at the StoryCorps website is the largest single collection of human voices ever gathered.
Wow.
And one of the neat things about it is it's everyday people. These aren't necessarily movers and shakers or somebody who's the president of a company. These are just small town people recalling an event in their life that was important to them. Oh my gosh, these are the kind of things that you want to find in your family history to help you know and understand your ancestors better.
We want that social history.
No kidding. There's also the smartphone app, the StoryCorps app that you can use on your smartphone, or you can go on your computer to the StoryCorps Connect. And the StoryCorps Connect area has really great questions and prompts and conversation tips for getting it moving.
So what are some other places that people can collect their stories? Some other websites or apps that you know about?
Well, FamilySearch Memories is on their app, and it is so super easy to use too. You just upload photos, or with the photos that you've already uploaded, literally just click on them and record your voice and your story right along with that photo there too. And that's all done right within the app. And that's completely free, and it can be done anywhere and at any time. So when you're just sitting in the car waiting for something, you could sit and record some memories right there.
Sounds like a good use of your time.
It does, really. I mean, probably better than Candy Crush, but
Maybe a little bit.
maybe a little bit. MyHeritage also, in their mobile app, they also have an area in the photos section where you can add audio stories to your photos. And I found a couple other apps that I really liked. One of them is called Pixstori. That's Pixstori.com. It's all free. Again, it'll pull photos right out of your camera roll, and you click on it, record the story. Now, you able to, if you want to, upload it to social media at that point, or you can just email it to yourself, and they email you this nice little file that's actually turned into a video. So there's your photo, and when you click on it, your audio is attached. It's super simple and really an easy way to go. And again, you email it to yourself, so you're saving it. It's not in some cloud somewhere that you can't access. Now, the last one that I found, I love maps and family history. And
I think most of us do.
I think so, right? So ArcGIS has awesome mapping programs, and that's in the engineering community. You know, they're kind of a standard. But they developed a website called StoryMaps.com where you can create these little maps of where your ancestors were and then add stories to it with maps and photos and other interactive content like audio as well. So that's it. That's a little bit more than you're going to want to do at a family gathering, but I wanted to add it just because it's so much fun to have a lot of visuals that aren't just your photos there. And believe it or not, there are hundreds of oral history projects out there that are looking for your stories. Depending on maybe your career or your ethnicity or anything, there are so many projects out there where you can participate by adding your story. You can just Google a location or a keyword followed by oral history project, and quickly you'll find hundreds of places online that might be collecting oral histories for specific topics or areas.
Well, I know as a member of the DAR, we've been hearing a lot for a couple of years, actually, about the America 250 project. So in a nutshell, America is turning 250 years old next year. Woo! Yay. Woo. We look pretty good, though, for being 250. They have an oral history project where they are collecting stories, and they have a webpage where they're saying that you can nominate history's unsung champions. So you can put in your information and talk about your nominee and whatever you think makes their story special, and tell them why you are nominating this person. It could be a friend, a family member, a neighbor. I believe it needs to be a living person, though. You can't nominate one of your deceased ancestors. Sorry. I guess they will decide if the story is something that they want, and they're going to collect all of these stories and record them, and they will be archiving them at the Library of Congress. So if you know of somebody that might be a good nominee, then you should fill out the form at america250.org/nominate and get your person's story in there.
You could probably nominate yourself too if you have an excellent America story. And, you know, a lot of us might just fit that bill. That's really cool. I did a quick search, as I suggested, with the words North Carolina followed by Oral History Project. And I came up with just a whole bunch of things. I came up with the North Carolina Oral History Project, the North Carolina Archives is looking for stories, North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission, Southern Oral History Program, and even the town of Carrboro, just a small town here in North Carolina, has their own oral history project asking people to include their stories of their life in this town. So you just never know who's looking for stories and where your story might benefit as well.
So let's circle back to some low tech ways to collect stories around the dinner table. This happens to me every time I visit my dad. He will just start spontaneously telling this amazing family story, and I have to just to discreetly reach for my phone and turn on an app so that I can record it. Or he turns around and goes, "What are you doing? Are you recording this?" Two apps that I like on my phone are the Voice Memos app, which I believe comes on your Apple phone. It's free. It's just called Voice Memos. And the other one that I use is called Voice Recorder and Audio Editor by Tap Media Limited. I think one of the things that drew me to it is that the app looks like an old school cassette tape recorder. So when you hit the button, you see this little old cassette tape recorder, and I look at it and go, "Aw, I remember those."
Well, that would be cool, because then if you're sitting there at the table with your phone sitting on the table, everybody relates to that.
People of a certain age, sure.
Okay.
My kid would have no idea what that thing was.
Whip out a rotary phone, then you're in trouble.
Okay, well, both of these apps are free to use for recording. And if you have the Voice Recorder and Audio Editor app and you want to transcribe your recordings later, you can do that straight from within the Voice Recorder app with a Pro subscription, which is about $1.99 a month. I think that that's a pretty fair price, but I don't have a Pro subscription. But what I have used is an app called Otter.ai, and you can get started with Otter.ai for free, and it will transcribe 300 minutes a month at 30 minutes per conversation. You may have noticed that Otter is integrated with Zoom, so you can transcribe your Zoom conversations with Otter, but you can also use Otter as an app on your smartphone, and they also have a website. So it is free to get started with Otter. Another option, if you don't want to get involved in that and you are familiar with Zoom, open up your own Zoom room all by yourself and turn on the closed captioning, and Zoom will transcribe your recording for you for free. So you just play your recording into your microphone and it will transcribe it for you.
I wonder, I have a kind of a question about that, and I don't know that we're going to have the answer on this. I know that when I have Zoom record transcripts for me of meetings, it breaks it into almost every sentence becomes its own line with a time and date stamp. That gets kind of a pain to edit out afterwards. So
it does, but it's better than having to do it all yourself. Old school. I did a stint as a secretary when I got out of college, and I had one of those headphone machines with footy thing under the desk, and I would type up the minutes from whatever they were doing that way. So, I mean, it's a lot easier than that, but sure, you're going to have some editing that you're going to need to do afterwards. The third option I was going to mention is that you could also try opening up a Google Doc and turning on the voice typing feature in the tools menu. I've tried this, but I haven't found it to be very accurate, and it can't distinguish between voices. So everything kind of runs together, and that's another editing nightmare. But this could be useful if you have a recording of just a single speaker who speaks very clearly. So I haven't been very successful with the Google Doc, but your mileage may vary. Now, keep in mind that, speaking of your mileage, these transcription services aren't 100% accurate. So whatever you use, you're probably going to need to do a bit of editing afterwards. But using an AI transcription service will probably save you quite a bit of time and will help you get your recordings into words on a screen that you can maybe publish in a book for your family later if you feel inclined to do so.
That's a great idea.
And let us know in the comments if you've found any good transcription services that don't cost a fortune that you would recommend.
Well, these have all been great ideas for capturing those stories when you've got family over, when you've got a group present, when you're sitting down to a big dinner. But, there's always family members who aren't comfortable sharing their stories, who were shy, who just don't want all eyes on them. I don't understand that. how can we go about engaging those people that are more shy, that would much rather just stay home? What ideas have you got there, Elizabeth?
Well, I've got some story collecting gift ideas that you could give to these people, or even to the people who didn't come to the family dinner for whatever reason. The first one is called StoryWorth, and they are at welcome.storyworth.com. I actually purchased a StoryWorth subscription for my dad about 3 or 4 years ago. And when I gave it to him for Christmas and he got the email and he called me up and he said, "What is this?" And I explained it to him that I wanted to get his life story and it was going to help him write it. And then we would get a book at the end. And he was not having it. He was just, I don't want to do that. But he really got into it. And how this works is they send a prompt by email to the person each week, and they answer it in writing, and they can type out their answer, and then they email it back. And then if you purchased it for someone else, then you get an email saying that your person answered it, and you get a copy of what they wrote. And I was thrilled every time he wrote one of these because I knew he didn't want to do it. But as the time went on, he really started to get into it. And they give you a whole bunch of prompts that you can use, or you can customize them for the user. And after the end of the first year, he wasn't done. So I got him another subscription and he started getting into it. And he would say, "Well, I don't want to answer this one. I want to write about my car that I had in high school." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Okay, you can do that." So I would customize the prompts for him. And eventually he got into it and he would just write his own prompts and put them in the website. And so, he was getting to write about whatever he wanted and he really got interested in it. It took him a couple or so years. I had to renew it a couple of times because he wasn't finished and he wanted to get it done before we printed it out. And I was totally fine with that. So when he finally finished, we went through the layout and put in all the pictures and made sure everything was how he wanted it, and then printed out several of the hardbound books. And he was so proud of it. And I said, "Dad, you're a published author now. You've published your autobiography." And I think he was really excited about it. And I got to keep a copy and he gave a copy to my sister. And I have it on my shelf now, and I'm really proud of him for that. And right now, if you go to StoryWorth, you can save $10 through January 1st on a StoryWorth subscription. So that is one idea.
That makes me think I have a small hardbound book that my grandfather wrote, and he also did not want to write down his stories, but my uncle offered to pay him $5 a page.
So bribery might work too.
Which really, it became evident because in the beginning, the book is really packed with, this is my life. But about midway through the book, it's very clear that he couldn't figure out what to write next, but he wanted that $5 a page.
Smart man.
Yeah, so I think I like the structured environment without the carrot on the stick so much.
It sounds like a little more stick than carrot there. So if you have family members who don't want to type, they don't like to type, they're not tech savvy, they don't have a smartphone, or maybe they don't even have internet access. Now, this one I don't have personal experience with, but it sounds really fascinating. And that is Storii, Storii, or as they would say in Hawaii, Storii. So this one is really good for auditory learners who like to speak and they don't like to write. They're thinking as they're speaking. And sometimes it's easier just to get people to talk instead of to write. So what they do is they have a library of 1,000 questions, or you can create your own questions, and your family member can schedule to get automated phone calls, or they can call in to record their answers whenever it's convenient. So they would get a call with their prompt, and then they just speak into their phone and they record their answer. And when they're done, you can download all of those recordings as an audiobook, or you can get a PDF of that book at any time. And if you want to give somebody something that you can wrap, or, a physical gift, then you can gift them a story gift box. It looks a little bit like a DNA kit. It's about the same size. And inside there is no spit vial, but there are activation instructions on how they get started and they activate their account. And there's also an example life story that they can see what that looked like. And they also have a sale going on right now for the holidays. You can save 20% with code FESTIVE24.
That one kind of sounds like an option that I came across online called Remento.co, Remento.co. It's more for people who don't want to write, but just want to record their stories without having to talk to anybody or interact with anybody. I totally get that some days.
Those are for the introverts.
Absolutely. They'll send weekly text prompts, and you can either include photographs that go along with what you want to talk about, or you can change the prompts completely, and you record your stories in your own voice. But what they do then is they take all those recordings and they turn it into a written book, but they use AI to take the voice recordings and make it into more of an actual book. It's a little bit more, I don't want to say formal, but grammar's been corrected and not a lot of ums and ahs stuck in there. So they'll create this hardbound book. And one of the really neat things about it is that every chapter has a QR code printed right in the beginning of the chapter that while you're flipping through and reading the book, if you scan that QR code, it will play the actual audio that chapter was made from.
Well, that's cool.
It looked really neat, and the pricing wasn't bad at all. And they're currently also offering a deal to save an extra $15 off if you use the code SAVE15. And they also have buy one, get one at 50% off. So if you want to create 2 books, you can get a good deal doing that too. Now, another option is completely low tech and very low cost, actually zero if you have your own home printer. My middle daughter did this for my dad when she was in college. Every weekend, she would email him a couple questions. And she did this entirely on her own. It wasn't scripted. She hadn't done any research or anything, but she just would send him 2 to 3 questions that she had about his life. And he would respond to her. She was his granddaughter. He was going to write back on an email. And he told her stories in these emails that neither my sister or I had ever heard. Everything about his life on the farm, stories about life with his siblings. He had a brother that passed away at 17 from muscular dystrophy and had never talked with us about that much. But he told her all sorts of stories. And one of the stories I loved that he included was about when he was 10 years old, he would start in the winter going out and hunting and setting traps. And then he would catch all sorts of small furry animals and get up in the morning, skin them, clean the pelts, and mail them to Sears Roebuck, who would then send him a check for $2 or $10 or $15 if it was a really good pelt. I had no idea. So we took all those emails and we compiled them into a book with the questions and the answers. And then I went and dug up family photos and just copied it off and gave copies to all the grandkids, all the relatives. And it's super special.
That sounds like an awesome idea. So you don't have to buy anything, just go low tech.
That's right. Well, email, I guess that about low tech as you can get.
So there you have it. We hope we've given you some good ideas for capturing and preserving family stories during the holidays or really any time that you get together with your family. Let's transition now into a couple of timely things that are happening right now. I got an email recently from the Association of Professional Genealogists informing their members about the Bring Our Heroes Home Act. That is Senate Bill 2315, House Bill 3110, and they are calling on its members and the genealogy community to urge Congress to pass this legislation as part of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025. Basically, the Bring Our Heroes Home Act, or BOHA, would form a missing armed forces civilian personnel records collection within the National Archives and Records Administration, which has previously coordinated and administered collections like this one. But Congress needs to provide NARA with the funding so that they can do this. And Congress needs to give them even more funding so NARA can support the additional workload of cataloging and storing those documents to make them easily accessible for families who are looking for closure about their lost loved ones, and also for those of us who are studying these soldiers and would love to see these documents and hopefully get them digitized. So please take a few minutes to contact your senators and your representatives and tell them why they should support this bipartisan legislation. We will put the links on how you can do this in the show notes. All right, Tami, what have you got for us?
Well, one of the things that's coming up and very timely is the National Genealogical Society Awards program nominations. Every year at their conference in the spring, give out about 10 different awards, and the nominations are all due by December 15th annually, and that's coming up here this year. Now, the awards are all over the place. There's the Philby Distinguished Librarian Award that a lot of people are familiar with. There's the Fellow of the National Genealogical Society, but there's several in here also just for individuals who have shown high levels of leadership or high levels of volunteerism. It's just a great way to recognize someone within the industry that you feel has made lots of great contributions. You can go to their website at ngsgenealogy.org/awards and read the whole list of all the different awards that they're going to be giving out. And the link is right there for nomination forms. So if you have someone that you think fits the bill for any of these awards, you can just go ahead and nominate them.
So get your nominations in, and if you miss this year's deadline, save them for next year. They do this every year. That is our tea kettle, and that means it's tea time. Time for tea. Get your pinky ready.
Got him going.
Okay, well, I'm going to spill some tea today about some genetic genealogy companies. You may have heard lots of news has come out about a variety of lawsuits that are currently happening. We've got class action suits against 23andMe, against GEDmatch, and now we've got Family Tree DNA joining the lawsuit party. Basically, these suits have to do with these companies allegedly violating the privacy of their users. For example, in this new case against Family Tree DNA, the suit alleges that Gene by Gene, the parent company of Family Tree DNA, installed tracking software on its website to report user movements to Meta/Facebook for advertising purposes, and this violates Illinois law. So I'm not going to go into the weeds on this. There are some really great blog posts by Leah LaPearl Larkin on her website, The DNA Geek, and another good one on Judy Russell's site at The Legal Genealogist. So I invite you to check those out. One thing to note, Blaine Bettinger in his Facebook group, Genetic Genealogy Tips and Tricks, he responded to a post about the Family Tree DNA lawsuit, and he is a lawyer, and he basically commented that these lawsuits are, and I quote, about minutia of website/company operations, as well as money grabbing by bored litigious plaintiffs that have too much time and money on their hands, rather than anything truly serious, novel, or groundbreaking. So basically, he thinks it's business as usual for those of us who use genetic genealogy in our research. Will I stop using genetic genealogy? Not yet. How about you, Tami?
Absolutely not.
No, I figure we don't really have much privacy anymore anyway, so...
If you live like you're living in a glass house, then you got nothing to worry about.
So that was my kind of bitter tea. Tami, what kind of tea do you have for us today?
I have much more pleasant tea, I believe.
Oh, good.
Just today, in fact, RootsTech announced the first 4 keynote speakers for the RootsTech conference, which will take place March 6th through 8th in 2025. So those 4 keynote speakers have been announced are author Ndaba Mandela, who's a prominent politician, a public influencer, and also the grandson of Nelson Mandela. The second is a prominent artist named Dana Tanamachi, and she's known for her 3-story mural at the Starbucks inside New York City's Empire State Building. And the final 2 are married couple, Olympic and Paralympic gold medalists Tara Davis Woodhall and Hunter Woodhall. And they are the first 4 keynote speakers to be announced.
Can't wait to hear what they have to tell us.
I've got one more thing that I want to share. I read this and I thought it was so wonderful. Idaho resident Marilyn Clement was recently recognized for her volunteer indexing on FamilySearch. Now, hopefully we've all done FamilySearch indexing and we've all been able to track how many names we've indexed, and you get that warm feeling of volunteerism when you do so. Well, Marilyn was recently recognized, and chances are real good that if you use FamilySearch records, you've probably come across some of Miss Clement's handiwork. At 92 years old, Marilyn Clement has now indexed 1 million names.
What?
That is just crazy, but I am so grateful to her and to everyone who volunteers to transcribe because it makes all of our research so much easier.
Thank you, Marilyn. She must have started when she was like 30.
I don't know. It goes
Or
pretty
she does
quick.
nothing else all day.
Well, at 92, I doubt that she's out hang gliding or playing racquetball, but maybe,
Maybe in her downtime, sure.
Downtime, there you go. If you want to do some volunteer work, there's always FamilySearch indexing, and I have to just put in a plug for volunteerism. The records that we use that are transcribed and indexed, someone has done that work, and a lot of it has been volunteer. And if you have 5 minutes that you want to spend volunteering, you can hop over to the conferencekeeper.org volunteer page, and there's a whole ton of different projects that are looking for someone to pop in and help out. So that's our show for you today. We want to thank you all again for listening and for your likes and comments. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our show so you won't miss an episode. And if you like what you heard, we'd love it if you'd leave a review.
Until next time, happy researching.